Chapter 8 is the second of our finance chapters for the preliminary course, and to begin this chapter we look at a common mathematical process which you've come across before, involving percentages. Now we just focus on a couple of aspects of percentages, and in particular percentage increase and percentage decrease. Now I'm going to show you two different ways that you can find a percentage increase or decrease, and you can choose which method that you use. I'd strongly encourage you to try the second method that I'm going to show. So, and again, there are different situations for percentage questions, and you need to be aware of slightly different wording of the question, which would result in a slightly different process. Now, just before, one more thing before we start, and that is, we don't ever do a calculation with a percentage in it. The only calculations we do in maths involve fractions, decimals, or whole numbers. So fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. So percentage has to be changed into, if you want to work with the particular percentage in a calculation, you have to change that percentage to a fraction or a decimal. Now most of you know that if you got 90% in an exam, that means you get 90 out of 100. So 90% is 90 out of 100. And when you write your 90% as 90 over 100, you've obviously converted it to a fraction. From there, it's very easy to go to the decimal, because dividing by 100, you move your decimal point back 2 places and it would become 0.9. And you can put a 0 on the end, but it's not necessary. So you'll see me doing that, changing my percentage to a fraction or a decimal. And it's important that you register what I'm doing as I demonstrated throughout the examples. So let's look at finding the percentage of a quantity. Please note what this is, to take a percentage of a quantity. It says we multiply the quantity by the percentage. So what's an example of that? Here it says take 67.5% of 112. That's obviously the percentage. It's pretty clear, percentage. This is a quantity, and it just happens to be a quantity in dollars. You can see there I've converted my 67.5% to a fraction. 67.5 out of 100. You could write it, as I've suggested here, as move the decimal point back 2 places and write it as 0.675. Multiply by 112.5, and doing that calculation, 0.675 times 112.5, you can see is 75.9375, and we would round that to 2dp. And we've got our 67.5% of 112. Try to think about the sizes of these. 67%, well, it's a bit more than half. It's not 3/4. So a bit more than half of 112. We can see that 75 is probably correct, because it's about the size we expect. So there you can see I've just done a bit of basic revision of finding the percentage of a quantity. Now, point 2 is very similar in that we will follow a very similar process mathematically. However, we're going to increase an amount by a percentage. And one way to do that is to find the required percentage, just like we did up here, and then simply add it on. So, for example, to increase $90.85 by 10%, we can always find the 10% of 90.85. So we want not 10%, convert it to a decimal, 0.1, and we will get that our new 110% is, let me work do a few of those calculations. And now you can see that I've calculated 10% of this amount, which works out to be, and I've rounded it to the nearest cent, 9.085 rounds to 9.09. Then, like we said, add on how much the increase is. So we're going to take the original 90.85 and add on 9.09, and we get 99.94 rounded to the nearest cent. Now, I'm going to encourage you, however, to see if you can work with this shortcut for increasing. It says better still to increase 90.85, which is what we had there, by 10%, simply take 110%. You may be wondering where that comes from. It simply comes from adding 10 onto our original 100. So yes, we do want 110% of the original. So the 110% is, and anyone wondering where the 1.1 comes from, we've changed the 110% to a decimal. 110% is 110 out of 100. And the decimal is, move the decimal point back 2 places. So as a decimal, it is this 1.1. And if I take the calculator and clear all that and do 1.1 times 90.85 equals, you get your 99.935, which is rounds to 99.34. Sorry, 94. Which is the same as we got by doing it in a two-step method. The advantage of this shortcut is it's a shortcut. We're really only doing one calculation. Here we're doing 2 calculations. We're finding how much to increase it by, and then we're adding it on. I guess the more steps, the more likely you are to make a mistake. You can see there's a similar situation. However, this time you're being asked to decrease an amount by a given percentage. So you can do it in your 2-step method where you find out your increase. So for example, your decrease. Decrease the 90.85 by 20%. So work out what 20% is. Converting it to a decimal is 0.2 times 90.85. The new percentage would be your 80%, but just a moment. So you can see that first calculation gives a decrease of $18.17, and step 2 is to actually decrease this amount, this 90.85 by that. So do the subtraction and you get 72.68. But I'm going to encourage you to use this shortcut. Now the shortcut is same as when we were increasing. We find our new percentage. Our new percentage if we're decreasing by 20, is now only 80. We only want 80%. And 80% as a decimal is 0.8. Let's go to the calculator, and if I do 0.8 times 90.85, you can see you get the 7268, which is what we got there, 7268. So you can see you get the same answer with less working and less opportunities to make a mistake. Stop the video there and do the example in another video.